Welcome, everyone. If you've joined us before, you know that it takes a few minutes for members of the audience to join, and that we will sit here and I am watching everyone come into the webinar on the screen. I am Jean Hoffman of the New England Rug Society. And as soon as I see that most of the people who have signed up have joined, we'll get started with our speaker. Thank you to everyone. I can see the numbers of you joining. We welcome all of you. We have people from 30 countries joining us today, last time I looked. And we at the New England Rug Society are so pleased to have great attendance from many places in the world to join these wonderful webinars that really bring us together as lovers of rugs and textiles. I'm Jean Hoffman of the New England Rug Society, and as many of you who've joined us before know, I will watch the screen and see people joining, and when it looks like most people have been able to log in, we will get started with our program today. My welcome will be followed by my colleague, Julia Bailey, who will introduce our speaker today. And we're just waiting for people to log in. So thanks those of you who have logged in for your patience as the rest of our audience joins. Again, welcome to all of you. In a few moments, we will be starting with our program. We have a big audience today. We're so pleased. We have people from 30 countries last time I looked. So I am watching. Many people are still joining. It does take a few minutes, and we usually start about 5 minutes after the hour. So a few more minutes for people to join, and then we will get started with the program. I hope all of you are having as beautiful a day or evening wherever you are as we are here in Maine. It's a wonderful sunny fall day with the famous Maine leaves turning colors. So just a few more minutes as we watch the audience, or I watch the audience, and you sit there, hopefully patiently, waiting for everyone to log in so that we can start. All right, I will get us started on our program today. Welcome to everybody who has joined thus far and to everyone who's still joining. On behalf of the New England Rug Society, we welcome you to our program on Yastiks with Brian Morehouse. A few housekeeping items to mention before we get started. We will take questions at the end. Brian Morehouse welcomes questions, and you may type your questions into Q&A found at the bottom of your screen in the Zoom controls at any time during the presentation. Those questions will not be answered until the end, and only questions typed in Q&A will be responded to. I'll do my best to get to as many questions as possible. Only questions in Q&A will be answered. All audience members, unfortunately for these webinars, and unlike wonderful live meetings where we have show and tell and gather in person, everyone is muted and video is off. There will also not be any responses to questions typed into chat. So if you do have a question, please put it in Q&A and know that the Q&A session will be at the end. We are recording today's session, and the recording will be available to members of the New England Rug Society to watch at your convenience. This is one of the benefits of membership, and we do welcome everyone to join. So, on to you, Julia, to introduce Brian.
Thank you, Jean, and welcome everybody. 25 years ago in 1996, we who were lucky enough to attend the 8th International Conference on Oriental Carpets in Philadelphia were entranced by a first of its kind exhibition consisting entirely of small-scale, purpose-woven Turkish pile rugs called Yastiks. Both the exhibition and its companion catalog were the work of today's speaker, Brian Morehouse. Brian is a Los Angeles native, where he's speaking from today. In addition to his 1996 book, he's the author of the chapter on Yastiks in the 2007 volume, Weaving Heritage of Anatolia. His other publications include a chapter in Stars of the Caucasus and articles in Holly. He's also the organizer of Rug Collectors Weekend, a yearly event in California that promotes interest in rug study and collecting. In today's presentation, Brian will tour the Yastik weaving areas of Anatolia, showing us the sources of regional Yastik designs and highlighting the design changes over time. So now, from wherever you are, please join me and Jean in welcoming our speaker, Brian Morehouse. Over to you, Jean, briefly, and then on to Brian.
Thank you, Julia. And now, Brian, for your talk. We're all looking forward to it.
Well, thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody and thank Julia Bailey and Jean Hoffman and the New England Rug Society for hosting this webinar on the 25th anniversary of the publication of Yastiks. Julia has laid out a very clear vision of what today's talk is going to be on. But before we get into the Yastiks in the book and some new Yastiks that have appeared on the market, I'd like to give you some brief context about Yastiks and cushion covers. Yastiks are symmetrically knotted wool pile weavings that are woven on the vertical and are woven with backs. They're generally a little less than 2 by 3 feet. And while they are woven on the vertical, as you can see in the top right screen, they are actually used on the horizontal. On the left, you see a tent, and in the back of the tent is a row of multiples of Yastiks, and in front of them are seated cushions called mindirs. This is one view of how they were used. Whether totally correct or not, I'm not quite sure. At the bottom left is an image of a black tent and its internal features of large chuvals or bedding bags that Josephine Powell had exhibited, in which she states that this was used as sort of a platform and that people could sit in front of and rest against. So a little different than what you saw in the top left. In the top right, you see a schematic of the interior of a black tent. You can see the various accoutrements that go inside the tent. In the entertaining area to the far left, over in this area, you just see some rudimentary pillows lying there, but no formal construct for yastiks. The more well-known use of yastiks is on what's called a sedir, which, as I'm pointing to, is a raised platform that contains multiples of yastiks that are, at least in the 20th century sense, when we look at photographs, exact copies of one another. However, in the 19th century, I don't find multiples. I don't think I've ever had an exact multiple. What I find is examples like on the top, which are basically from the same village, maybe even the same family of weavers, but they've changed the proportions a bit and altered the colors. On the bottom, you see another two yastiks that were probably woven in the same village, but again have a slightly different border, and you can see the use of white is more extensive on the yastik on the right. Have we lost the multiples of these, which must have added up in the tens and tens or hundreds of thousands? I simply don't know. Or did people just use these and they weren't as exacting as they were in the previous photographs? Now, just who wove these? These were woven by Anatolian women. My wife and I went to visit the lady on the left who's holding the yastik. She lived outside of Konya. When we arrived, we found out that she had some years before passed away, but her family brought out this yastik to show us. Now, these other photographs are from an earlier period, but I just wanted to show some of the faces and living circumstance where other people who wove yastiks lived. The lady in the middle is also living in a stone, mud brick and wood house, village house, as the woman on the left was. On the bottom, you see a family living in the plains area in a black tent. And in the top, you see people living in the high mountain regions, possibly in Darsim in the eastern part of Anatolia. The lady on the left here, on the right, I'm sorry, at the bottom right, I'm showing because she has these wonderful tattoos, which women decorated themselves with. They actually adorned themselves with them. You can see on her chin, she has a rosette flanked by two animals of a style you find on rugs. You can also see on her hand, you can see there is a triangle. It has animals inside and outside. There are various geometric features. It's no wonder we find things like these and totemic devices in rugs and yastiks. Now, just where are these things made and how? And I've divided them up into three categories: Western Anatolia to the left, Central Anatolia, and Eastern. And I find out that in these areas, the rugs in these areas tend to be more like one another than outside these areas of demarcation. Although, of course, we find overlapping in borders and some designs. Also wanted to point out that Anatolia has influences being surrounded by Georgia, Armenia, Iran, Iraq, and Greece. So you can imagine the influences brought upon their weavings. Now, this is a population a census, an Ottoman census. And if we look at the census, we see that if we consider the Turkic people of having populated 30% of Anatolia, which seems to be the rule. Then we find, if we look at these numbers, that about 13 or 14 million people other than Turkic people lived in Anatolia. Roughly about 4 million people at that time would have been living in Anatolia that were Turkic. I only bring this up to show that many people wove rugs, and we need to consider all of these people in the process. So a little bit of history. The item on the left is in the Ashmolean Museum, and it's from the 8th or 9th century, and it is a cushion. You can see that it has lappets at both ends, and it also has a remaining button, which was the closure that encased the backing for the stuffing. So this is the earliest example of a cushion I have, and it happens to have lappets. The image in the middle is a Gellurid painting from the late 15th century. Gellurids were cousins of the Mongols, and when the Mongols left in around 1350, the Gellurides remained for some time. Behind the man and lady sitting on a carpet, you see two things that look like they could be cushions and may have lappets on them. I'm not sure exactly what they are, and usually yastiks are not used in this fashion. They are used by the nobility and potentates, as you see to the right. This is Mehmet I, which would be around, he's older in here, it would be probably about 1413 to 1420. You can see that he's sitting on cylindrical pillows or bolsters, which were more accommodating when you were sitting on the floor. Now, to the bottom here, where I'm pointing, also in India, around the 15th century, they started using a lot of lappets in their printed cottons and even in some of their beadwork. On the right of it is a classic group of lappets that we see on yastiks. This happens to be from the piece on the yastik on the front of the cover. So here is a painting by an artist in 1460. The title of the painting is called King René's Book of Love by Bartholomew de Eck. And what's important here is that I originally thought that this was a yastik because I didn't have a good picture of it, and I could only see part of it, and the dark part I couldn't see until Julia supplied me with a better picture. But you can, I've never seen a short, narrow Memling Gul piece like this, especially from the 15th century. So one might assume that if this was done in the 15th century, it is quite possible that yastiks such of this, like this, were also possibly made at that time. That's conjecture and inference, but I think the comparables are so there that if they were making yastiks, they would probably make one in this design. So here is a harem scene dated to around, let's see, 1654. And you can see yastiks in the foreground. Hard to make out what they are really made of, but because the lappets are rather bold and chunky, and the piece is rather more congested than in a velvet yastik, which we will get to, these are quite possibly pile yastiks, although they have fringe at each of their ends. It is hard to say, but here they were used in this setting on a raised platform or a mindir. So here is a painting by a famous Orientalist artist, Alphonse Leopold Milik, and it's painted in 1891, so 130 years ago. And the gentleman seated is pointing to a yastik and discussing it with these two gentlemen. And that yastik is almost a carbon copy of an example I've put on the right. On the floor are two other Yastiks, which I recognize. The one that's on the bottom is shown on the top left, and it is not dissimilar from the Yastik that I am pointing to on the ground. And then curled up is a Yastik over here, which I recognize because of the design and the blue field, and this group is replicated here, and we will see this, this piece later. So these three pieces actually represent three types of Yastiks, which we will come across. One, Yastiks that have lappets, Yastiks that have panels, and Yastiks that have neither but have killing ends. Just to give you an idea of some of the types that we'll be looking at. So here are two of the oldest known Yastiks. The one on the left is from Kendrick and Tattersall in 1922, and at that time it was in private hands. The one on the right was in F.R. Martin in his publication, and this was in the Victorian and Albert Museum, but it was lost, and so we don't know where either one of these Yastiks are currently. So here is a famous Yastik that came up for sale, the one on the right recently. And let's take a look at its possible prototype, which is a velvet Yastik in the Metropolitan Museum dated to the 18th century. If we look to the sides of this velvet Yastik, we see floral representations. And if we remove these pine tree-like looking features, and we're just left with the vegetal forms on the side and the medallion, they are not dissimilar to what we find on this Yastik. And we find that the floral elements are segmented in each. And of course, the small medallion is unusual in a Yastik such as this, but we find that small medallion as well here. Excuse me. So how do I feel that these may have come from a similar source or the same source, and not by coincidence? In each corner, there are 4 barbed designs on the horizontal, here, 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 and here. We find on the Yastik that there's also 4 barbed features here, 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 and here. It would be very unusual and very coincidental that this would happen. So they've either both drawn the design from the same source or one possibly copied from one another. The velvet piece is attributed to the 18th century. The Yastik sometimes is attributed to the 17th, but I think I would go with the latter. So here is a map showing Western Anatolia, because we're going to start to look at some Western Anatolian Yastiks. The area where to the top, where you see Çanakkale and Ezine, is an area within this triangle where certain groups of rugs are very clearly defined and recognizable. If you move a bit further south to Bergamo and through the Balıkesir area, there are also very distinctive groups of weavings and Yastiks as well. I tend to call this area more the red, white, and blue area, as many of these rugs feature predominantly red, white, and blue colors with accents in green and yellow. But our major interest, besides we will get to this area up here in Çanakkale, is this area to the bottom of your screen, which is in this ellipse. And it's called the Menderes River Valley, where Duzgir Yastiks appear from. Now, the Menderes River Valley runs from, I believe, up near Eskişehir, and it runs all the way down between Uşak and Afyon, and runs all the way down to the Aegean. Now, within this area, As I mentioned, there are well-known weaving centers. You have Kula, Uşak, Afyon, and Milas. So let's take a look at some of these rugs. This style rug is known as a ghirlandaio rug. And what we are concerned and interested in here is the outer part of the medallion. In the picture to the right of it, you can see there are two medallions, like the one I just pointed out, one here and one here. And each of these medallions are used to make corner brackets. And what's important here is in these medallions are these colorful segmented areas. And we see 3 boxed areas that run along each of the sides. Now, these rugs are known to have been woven, as pointed out by Henry Glassy in his Turkish Traditional Art Today in his book. And he mentions that these rugs were woven in the Ezine, Çanakkale area for hundreds of years. And these are some later versions of that rug, but you can see that they are basically very, very much the same. They are known in these villages as tornali medallions. And of course, not ghirlandaio, which was a name we accord to them to the Renaissance artist. So if we look to the Yastiks for influence, we see the medallion in the ghirlandaio or the tornali, and we see it over here. I've compressed it, and basically you see that this same feature is used in the corner brackets of this yastik and in the corner brackets of this yastik. So how can we even be more sure that that's the case? Because in the medallions, as I pointed out, they always have 3 boxes running alongside the medallion, and we find 1, 2, 3 boxes, as well as the segmented color areas that we find in these tornali or ghirlandaio rugs. What is, I think, remained is that the internal part of the medallion is a bold cruciform, which I've enlarged here, and I believe they've just adapted this cruciform to each medallion. A second group of rugs from the Dazgir-Menderes River Valley are based on an 8-lobed lotus idea or flower. You can see the 8-lobed lotus here. Here in a 17th century velvet, you can see the 8-lobed outer form and the 8-lobed inner form. Also in a 16th century Anatolian rug, you also see a similar 8-lobed form. So how does this apply to yastiks? Let's also keep in mind, not only do they have the 8 lobes, but in this instance, they have anchors at the top and bottom. When we look at yastiks, we see the same feature. We see an 8-lobed outer floral feature with 2 pendants at top and bottom, as we saw on the velvet, and an inner 8 petaled floral arrangement. What's unique about this group, and we'll see some others, is that it has a main border, which others do not, and this inner sort of candy cane-like looking inner guard border. So there are pieces from this village that are interrelated. This is the most complex and detailed lappet that I know of, and it's very rare because you don't really see lappets in Dazgir-Menderes River Valley, Western Anatolian yastiks. Not only is this a very fine and intricate one, it's very rare to find. You'll see in the image to the right a similar style where you have a main border, no outer border, and this inner sort of candy cane striped feature. And you see the 8-lobed floral feature both inside and outside. And I think that we will notice that there is a corner brackets that are very, very, very similar. They feature 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 buds coming out of the corner brackets. And this is traditional. You see the same here, 1, 2, 3, 4. This group has a marker, either a weaver's marker or a totemic feature that we will see later in other yastiks. It doesn't appear in this one. So this is the second group of related yastiks to the ones we've just seen, but they don't have a single border. Instead, they have 2 guard borders, serrated guard borders, but maintain the similar features that we saw in the previous example. They have 8 buds on the corner brackets, and they have these signature emblematic features that we saw. And we also find that on this example, which also has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buds again. So everything very consistent. And it also has this monograms or totemic symbols, if you will, that we found on the others. When we move along, we find this example, which has 1 sawtooth outer border, and instead of 5 buds coming up alongside the brackets, we have basically 3. We don't have the signature emblematic things unless it's replicated or trying to be that here. But a beautiful rendering of the lobe medallion, beautiful colors. These are all very, very nice examples. Here are 2 examples of a related type, the same 8 lobe floral features without the emblems that we saw in the other ones, or totems, but maintaining the same design construct that we saw in the previous examples. Here we see another example that has maintained the same design. And in each of these, at the kilums, are these little pile woven eye-shaped features, which I believe is to ward off the evil eye. And not only are they here, but they're also used in this piece too. So these weavings maybe have been woven fairly close to one another. This border is geometricized. You see a triangle here. That triangle would have been a carnation, but this border has geometricized. And I show you over here a similar border taken from another piece, which we will see. And it's basically the same border, but you can see the geometric part of it are actually small carnations. There are small carnations here, and over here they've been geometricized, just to show you how some of these designs work. Here is a rug I've had for quite some time, and it's a large dusgear main carpet. And the important things to point out here in relationships to yastik is on the corner brackets, there are flowers budding from each of these segments here. You can see in this yastik, there is a similar budding on the corner brackets as we find on the main carpet. Also on the main carpet, we find medallions and rosettes with crescent, back-to-back crescents. And here in the yastik, you can see back-to-back crescents. They're used here and in the medallion. And of course, in these groups, they make use of a lot of carnations, which we see here, we see all throughout here. And we will see that popping up in the next slides. So here we have 3 yastiks from the Mindiris River Valley. Notice they all have the same paneling at the top and bottom. They make use of the same panels. And we see once again these back-to-back crescents, the use of carnations, wonderful use of yellow, which is very common. And we see that in this example, which is a bit unusual, the border has changed. When we get to this example, it refers back to the first example more clearly. And it too has the same panels. And again, you see the back-to-back crescent moons that show you that these are all interrelated, as well, of course, as the use of the panels. So here are two other Mandiris River Valley Yastiks. But here the design, I believe, is taken from a 18th century Caucasian rug that was in the Kirkheim collection. And if we deconstruct the design, you can see that the quatrefoil that's formed here goes into these various four features here. We find the same thing happening in the Yastik. We find these 1, 2, 3 features with these appendages going into these features. And if we look at the secondary features here, they are not so dissimilar from here. So I believe that there is a connection between this design and the medallions that are formed here. They've, of course, been adapted and changed over time and space to reflect the sensibility of the village weavers in this area. Here we find an unusual piece. We find a Yazdik that is modeled after a 17th, 18th century Western Anatolian rug, which we can see here on the far right. And in a close-up, we can see at the top center that there is a tulip-like device here with a carnation in the center with a trident. If we look at the Yazdik, we actually can find the same thing. We find this tulip-shaped feature with a carnation with a trident. So what's interesting about this piece is that the Yazdik on the left shows features of central Anatolia, shows features of mujars. This is a very classic mujar style lapid, and also the use of panels is also indicative of Yastiks made in the mujar area. So a bit of a conundrum: was this piece woven in Western Anatolia using the devices that are clearly replicated here, or was it woven in mujar and copied the formatting and designs that we find in these Western Anatolian carpets? So here we move on to Central Anatolia, and I've outlined here in a bold outlining some of the weaving areas that we find Yazdiks most prominent. If we start over here in Konya and we go west, we have villages like Derbent and Ketsamusini and others that we find Yazdiks woven in. If we go down the road a bit, we go to Chumra and go around to Karaman and Iranchi, we find Yazdiks being woven there. If we follow the road up here, we go to Karpanar and Hotamas, which are well-known weaving areas. Outside of this area, we have Nide, which many Yazdiks are attributed to. And if we go further north, we go to Aksaray, and leaving Aksaray, we go up to Ortaköy, Mujar, and Kirshire, which we know are Yazdik producing areas. If we come back down and go to Irgup and in Sisu, we are in Cappadocia area. And so this whole area, Yazdiks were woven. Up here is Cianbeli, which is a Kurdish enclave. They were forced migrated there, and it's a little hard to say exactly what they wove. So let's take a look at some of the weavings from there. This is the cover piece of the Yazdik book, and I just wanted to take a moment and compare it with the 17th century Yazdik that we've talked about before. I could find no replication in the cover Yazdik with the medallion with arrows and the internal features being a boxed-in area with radiating lines. The only thing that even came close was this yastik. This yastik is attributed to the Karapanar area. And this yastik, while we don't know much about it, has Karapanar features, which is the bold use of white outlining, which is very indicative of weavings in Karapanar. One of the very unusual features of this yastik is that these lappets are like no other pile lappets used in pile weavings. They are unique. But I bring this up because I can't find anything else that relates to the cover piece. Here we find that the cover piece is being replicated over time. This yastik on the left is a very honest replication of the design. It keeps many of the features, including this sort of wistful floral feature here, and the use of 4 leaves in the lappets, which is on the cover piece. But as we move in time and space, we find that the lappets now have 2 leaves. We find that the corner brackets are not wistful floral elements, but more bold, straightforward, linear features. And the field is filled with a multitude of little designs. As we move further on in time, we find that they have discarded the corner features completely just for lines. The filler elements that were in the center have been removed. So as you get later in time, you find that many times things are added to yastiks, and many times later on they're subtracted from their designs. So here are 2 rugs from a small village called Iranchi, and on the left is a main carpet, and on the right is a prayer rug. We know of some of the main carpets, and they are distinctive by their type of basket-like weave. The prayer rug on the right is the only prayer rug I know from this village, and it maintains a similar weaving structure. For us, what's notable here is this butterfly-style border, because we're going to see it replicated on yastiks, and we can see how they become clearly distinctive, even just from that feature. Here are 3 yastiks from that same village or area. Notice they have the same butterfly border, and they have similar weaving structures. The medallions have an inner and outer medallion with this sort of outer ghost-like medallion that forms around the inner medallion. And here in the second yastik, you can see that that same ghost medallion is formed around the main blue medallion. And in our far piece on the right, the same occurs. You have your outer ghost medallion with your blue medallion. So they are all interrelated, woven maybe in the same villages near one another, maybe near the same time period. It's hard to say, but you can see the weaver's own creative sensibilities used in how she portrays these. Now, we've all heard about Holbein rugs, and over here is a painting by Holbein. And over here, you can see there is what's known as a Holbein medallion. Remember these little hooked appendages, because we'll talk about them in a minute. We also see that there are corner brackets in this painting as well. So there are more than just one Holbein medallion in his paintings. So the more common one is the one here on the right. But this is also a Holbein medallion. And what I'd like to show you is that this medallion is very distinctive because it is made up of a star in the center, flanked by 8 boxes and little stars that that move around it. You see these little phalanges or appendages that stick up. We will also see that in the Yastiks. So this is a close-up of a Yastik we'll see in a minute. And notice that it has the same star with the 4 boxes and little diamond-shaped features around it, and these little hooked appendages, which are also in the second. This is a 12th to 13th century Holbein fragment, I believe, in the Weir collection. So here are 2 Yastiks that maintain this style Holbein medallion. Here we are again seeing the Holbein medallion. I put it across from these other 2. And you can see the consistency in the design that we have just spoken of. The star with the diamonds and the boxes surrounding it, and the little phalanges, the little extra hooked features that we find. The piece at the bottom right is less articulated in formulating the Holbein medallion. This is probably made in the, I don't know, maybe the Balakashir Yunshu area, and they've tried to make this internal feature similar to what we find over here, but it's just simply done differently and not as articulated as well. So many people have asked me about this design, and here's what I can tell you. This design in this Yastik was basically taken from a 16th century Anatolian border feature. I've replicated it here, and I've made a mirror image of it here. And when you put the 2 together, they form the 2 flowers confronting each other with a cruciform design with hook features at the ends of the quatrefoil. So if we go across, we can see that the Yastik actually is comprised of the same basic design construct. It's a matter of putting the features together. If we move over to the far right and look at a piece that's designated as a golden triangle piece, you will see at the bottom and top the similar floral features. The hooked features that we saw to the left are simplified here, but the basic features extend into a diamond shape with a cruciform instead of what we found, which was a straight cruciform. If we go up here to look at an early East Anatolian rug, you'll see there's a flower at the top, a flower at the bottom, and a step polygon here with a cruciform in the middle, all stemming from the same basic border concept. So here is a Yastik that was in the book, and another one that appeared later. And this design sort of mystified me for a while, but I think that this design comes from the secondary features shown here in Loto rugs. I can't account for this design anywhere else, and we know that the people who wove Yastiks copied from well-known examples in carpets. But if you deconstruct and look at the stylistic features here, I think, and look at the top and the bottom, you'll see that if we can deconstruct them, they are very, very similar, and I think that they are taken from one another. The Yastiks have taken and borrowed this feature. So here are 3 Yastiks from what is known as the sazleaf design. You can see that in a velvet here, 16th century, 17th century velvet. And in a small rug, not a Yastik, this is around 5'8" by, I believe, 5'4" or something thereabouts. But you can see it is in keeping and with the design found in this Yastik. They have similar lappets, although the construct and size is bigger, but they have similar corner brackets and saws leaves, and of course the internal features are very, very much the same. These pieces, even this piece tends to be a little wider than some Yastiks, and notice it doesn't have a border, which is in keeping with the velvet Yastiks, whereas this rug does have a border. Here we have other sazleaf Yastiks from the Mujar area. The one on the far left is a bit unusual. It has corner brackets and an extra panel at the bottom and top, and classic lappet features we find in the Mujar area. It has a beautiful green background and an aubergine colored center. Moving to the middle example, we find that the corner brackets have been replaced by rosettes. There isn't any extra panels before the guard borders. And a few other features. There's no latch hooks. There's little floral elements coming out of the sides where there are latch hooks here. So there's variations in these. And as well as this doesn't have a border per se, it has just a sort of a zigzag form. Here you find a more regular border. Moving on to the far right, you see that it's maintained a border like the centerpiece, but it has lost its corner features and it's lost its lappet style that we found indicative of the prior two examples. In the Mujar area, they also are known for making striped Yastiks. Here again, you can see the classic lappets that you find in Mujar area. And you can see that at the bottom here is a border style that is repeated in this style of border and is repeated in this style of border. So there is some connectivity in the design constructs, in the use of the lappets and the use of the borders, and in variation of handling the stripes. These stripes have latch hooks inside. These have sort of C elements, back-to-back C elements, and this is sort of show V-shaped forms in the stripes. So the weaver has used her own creativity in developing the use of stripes. This is a group of Yastiks I call the 4 arrow-headed group. Each of these Yastiks have 4 arrowheads that come together in the center. Here you have 1, 2, 3, 4, just not as pointed, but it's the same construct. And over here you have 4 arrows coming to the center. Now each of this style Yastik have white corner brackets holding sort of the medallions almost in place. And they all feature latch hook outer medallions. Here we find it, here we find it, here we find it. But they are all from different weaving areas or villages, but they have maintained a similar construct. But in many ways, this is very abstract and very, very unusual to see the wonderful abstraction in it. So here we see the Yastik that we pointed out earlier on. It has a panel at the bottom and it has a panel at the top, but in this group, the panels are never replicated. They're always different. They all tend to always have big S borders, and the internal features tend to have this sort of stem and floral feature that is often found in Mujar prayer rugs. You can see the example to the right, which was in the book. The example on the left was not in the book. And you could see it has similar features, even maintaining the same panels at the bottom, likely woven in the same village, maybe even by the same family. A little later on, we find another Yastik, but it has a different border, but it has maintained the same basic design construct in the middle, but of course without the replication of the panels. I'm not sure exactly where these were woven, somewhere possibly near Mujar, maybe near the Ortaköy area. Now here is a yastik that I wanted to show because the design has the same features as we find in this prayer rug. You can see these distinctive corner brackets here are replicated here. You can see the medallion with the star in it is almost exacting. And you see these unusual flower heads or bird heads on a vine. And this happens on this sort of totemic approach to the same design. So I just wanted to show you that sometimes Yastiks pilfer designs from other types of rugs, such as this prayer rug, or maybe it was vice versa. And here we show that border that I mentioned to you that was the same as an earlier border that had a carnation in it, which I pointed out in the other example, which is over here, was geometric in nature. But this is the rug that shows the floral element. So why am I showing you these three prayer rugs? This one probably woven around circa 1700, 1680 or 90. This rug is a rare Mindiris River Valley rug, probably woven around 1720 or 30. And this is a little later rug, not quite sure where it was woven, but what is important for our discussion is that all three of these rugs have hanging carnations. There's a hanging carnation here, a hanging carnation here, and a hanging carnation here, even if abstracted. Now, what I find interesting is these are all Western Anatolian prayer rugs. But when it comes to yastiks, none of these are from Western Anatolia, but there's a group of them that feature these hanging carnations that we saw in the prayer rugs. You can see that in each of these pieces, they maintain the same guard borders and the same basic confronting carnation form. These two have similar borders and main borders and ivory backgrounds and similar design features, while this piece, of course, has a blue field, a different border, but has maintained the same design, but still keeping the same guard border. So somehow there was a prototype out there that lent itself that these inner guard borders were going to be maintained, even though some of the design and coloration was going to change. So here we are in Eastern Anatolia. The first triangle to the left shows famous weaving area of Sharkisla, Sivas, Zara, Tokat, and Davri. And there are rugs that we shall see that are distinctively made in this area. To the south is a very prolific Yastik weaving area that one finds between Gaziantep, Adıyaman, Malatya, Elazig, and Tunçili. Some of these Yastiks were made in the Sinan mountain region that lie between these areas. And in the north, we find near Erzurum and Bayburt and Kagizman and Erzurum and Kars, a different group of weaving, different colorations. I've circled Hakkari because that's a weaving area. It's a little bit off the beaten path, and Reyhanli down here to the south. But these are very important weaving areas. So I've sort of featuring this group of rugs to make a point with Yastiks. These rugs are known as Sharkislas. This rug was originally purchased by Ronnie Newman at auction and sold over the last few years. And And what is unique about it is that it is the medallions, the concentric medallions, are surrounded by a latch hook outer yellow field motif. And in this field motif are 45-degree anthropomorphic figures. And in between the medallions are these rosettes that separate them. So this concept is related, the construct is related to this group of rugs, which are also sometimes referred to as Charkislas. Notice that the outer area is similar to the top example, surrounded by a lighter colored latched hook outer feature. And you can see here these, again, these abstract zoomorphic figures. And in between the medallions, you can see the rosettes, which are in keeping with the top example. However, the border on this piece is very much like the borders we find on rugs that are also woven in Eastern Anatolia, of course, and often referred to as baklava type designed weavings. And these weavings are therefore more related to this group because of the internal medallions are somewhat similar. And they too are surrounded by an outer latch hook field motif that separates the main medallions. When we move over here to the classic Charkisla rug, we find that none of that happens that we saw in the prior rugs. There is no outer latch hook, outer field motif framing of these medallions. Instead, we find these very elegant back-to-back, almost bird-like features with these beautifully drawn pendants or secondary medallion forms that are featured between here, but they are not in keeping with either of these three. They are their own individual type, and they are what have been found and documented by Chansonier in the mosque at Charkisla where they were found. So here are Yastiks that replicate the baklava design that we just featured. And here we see a Yastik with two medallions with their latch hooks. And here we see a Yastik with three medallions and their outer latch hooks. And here we see a Yastik made up of multiple medallions with their latch hook features on the outside framing of the medallions. These are three East Anatolian Yastiks, which are often seen among a group of East Anatolian Yastiks. When we're talking about them, this style often pops up. The one on the far left was possibly made in the Shavak, Chunchili, Elize area. The piece in the middle was most likely woven more in the Malatya, Sinan area. And the piece on the far right, I'm not quite sure. It's its own style. I'm not sure where it was made. I used to think maybe closer to Rehanli, but I really don't know. But it's a beautiful cruciform decoration in the center. So we're through looking at Yastiks, and I just wanted to mention to you that we don't often get a chance to visit rug stores anymore and sit and have tea and discuss rugs with people. So to instill that same view and attitude, I'd like to invite you to Rug Collectors Weekend next April 26th through the 28th in Santa Barbara County, California, where we will be seeing many of these Yastiks in person and we will be seeing many rugs from collections which you can actually feel and discuss with their owners and learn something about them. So I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for your fascinating presentation. Not surprisingly, you have generated lots of questions, and I'm going to do my best to lob them at you. Also, we'll be combining numerous questions because there's some real themes. So first of all, there are numerous questions about lappets.
Mhm.
Do you have a theory as to the origin of lappets? One questioner surmises that they might have been some kind of battle flag. What about that, or the origin of
Well,
lappets?
many years ago, John Thompson was our house guest, and we sat down at breakfast one morning to discuss such things. We never really came up with an answer. They also are very similar to heraldic features that we find, particularly when the Crusaders came into Anatolia. Many of them, because of primogeniture and so forth, settled in Anatolia and tried to make their fortune. And we had discussed that maybe these were from them. But I showed you an Egyptian 8th and 9th century cushion with lappets. And that was just from the 8th or 9th century. We don't know how early they went back to, and we don't know what their origin is exactly. Some people think they're various things, but to be honest with you, I don't know, and no one has a real answer.
You mentioned that lappets on Western Anatolian Yastiks were rare, and you
Yes.
showed us many beautiful lappets of greater and less detail on Central Anatolian Yastiks.
Yes. Yes.
Why did the Central Anatolian weavers favor lappets? Why not the other areas?
The answer is I don't know. Maybe a tradition was built in more strongly and popularized in that area. I do have an inkling that, and this may or may not relate directly to this, that in Western Anatolia, especially in the Menderes River Valley, and Menderes meaning we get the word meander and whatever, and you can see the Greek connection. That area was heavily populated by Greek people for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And I believe in Western and Southwestern Anatolia, there is a Greek island influence, even in their colors and use of floral features. It may be that lappets were more of a Turkic thing, or more. I'm really not sure the answers to provide you. Lappets are a mysterious thing. That's why I showed you the early piece from the Ashmolean dating to the 8th or 9th century.
You mentioned the bright colors in some of those Western Anatolian Yastiks, and indeed a member of the audience noticed the quite spectacular colors in some of them.
Mm-hmm.
The audience member comments that some of the Yastiks seem more brightly colored than rugs. Is that an observation you'd agree with? Do you have comments?
More brightly colored? No, I think maybe you're finding a more condensed weaving construct where the colors are maybe more apparent because you're seeing them in a smaller rarefied area, and they may pop out at you as such. Where you have a larger rug, you have a greater palette to see color. I would say I haven't thought about it. I'm not sure that's the case, but you'll use your own artistic sensibilities to discern that.
Thank you. And Brian, I know you're not a big dating guy, but we do have an audience member who wants to know what's the oldest Yastik you can show, or maybe you want to comment on age.
Sure, happy to do that. I didn't show a Yastik that is in the book. I believe I've mentioned that it is the oldest dated yastik that I believe I've seen. I believe the date on it was 1831, and it will be shown at Rug Collectors Weekend. It's in the book, and there was another yastik which I showed that took its design from the Loto rug, which I believe sort of translates to the mid-19th century. I think we can realistically say that yastiks were made for hundreds of years. The non-dated examples, it's really hard to say how old they are, but we use our experience and feeling and touching and looking at the designs to try to make some sort of assessment. I just usually say that these appear a little older than those, whatever those are. I do think that there are some that can be somewhat credibly dated to circa 1800, but beyond that, I don't push it, because many of these yastiks were brought to this country and used as doormats on the side of beds, under desks, and simply worn out. And some of those yastiks that came to this country may have been brought in 1910, 1915, and maybe they were 100 years or 70 years or 60 years at the time, and we simply don't have those.
Thank you. And a note to our audience who want to ask questions, as I announced in the beginning, please type your questions into Q&A. You cannot see the questions in Q&A if you're a member of the audience, but I can, and will ask those questions of Brian. We will not be taking any questions that anyone types into chat. So please type your questions into Q&A. And on to a question people ask about yastiks often, Brian. Were they woven for personal use, or were they woven for sale?
Both. I think what we find is that many of the yastiks that were woven in the early part of the 19th century were used for home use. As the Grand Tour in Europe developed and there became a market for rugs, we find that various dealers would go out and buy and collect rugs and bring them to the bazaars and bring them to Istanbul. And by the time you get to a lot of the merchants, like in Liberty House and in England, and many dealers leaving Anatolia and moving to the United States and other places, you find this. So anyway, thank you for the question.
Thank you. And how about the zigzag design that we see protruding into the field from the borders on the yastiks, in particular, those blue ground ones with the plant motif and a central medallion?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thoughts about the source of that zigzag design, please?
Well, I don't know. I wasn't there to configure it or ask the weaver. Most of what we do with Anatolian village rugs, and many rugs in general, is we look at things inferentially. We just can infer that certain things happen. We don't know for sure any of this. The weavers aren't around to tell us. Some people say those things replicate water. Some people say the zigzags replicate mountains. And some people just say that they frame the medallions and offer a wonderful visual experience.
Thank you. Carnations feature in some of the yastiks you've shown us today. Have you seen tulips in any yastiks?
Oh, yes. Yes. Actually, in the piece that we showed the carnation, I think one of the carnations was set in a tulip. And there are, of course, tulip-styled rugs in Western Anatolia and a different style tulip variant in the Karpinar region that we find in rugs. I can't think of a Yastik with a tulip from central Anatolia, but we do find rugs with a certain tulip style in the Karpinar area. But we don't find a lot of them in Yastiks. That's why the Yastik I showed with the possible tulip with the inner carnation is a very unusual piece lifted from a West Anatolian main carpet, maybe made in Jordas or Kula.
And the ever-present question about nomads as applied to Yastiks.
Sure.
Do we have any evidence in the use of Yastiks by Anatolian nomads?
The whole thing about nomads and Yoruk deserves its own webinar or its own discussion. I showed you some tents at the beginning. Some of those tents were used by, the styles would have been used by nomadic Turkic people like the Serkeçli. And they may have been also used by Kurdish families who may have used these things differently. I'm not so sure Yastiks were used in the tents as portrayed in the photograph that I showed you. I think that that photograph was staged. And I'm not so sure that Yastiks were lined up in a formulaic way in tents as we saw in the beginning image. I think they were much more random than that. As far as nomads weaving things, I think the whole concept is still out there in terms of what did the Yoruk and nomads actually weave. I think most things were woven by villagers, you know, who could easily get wool and dyes that they needed for Yastiks. But I'm not so sure that many of the nomads wove much of anything in pile weavings other than flat weaves or akshuvals or alachuvals or kilims. But this is an open question.
Yes, and back to carnations again. You showed a slide with 3 confronting carnation Yastiks. Where do you think those were made?
Well, I put them in there because it's a little bit mystifying that they don't appear to relate to anything. What you do with Anatolian village rugs, often you try to find answers about by looking at what they aren't rather than what they are. And this is often a case when you're dealing with the things like this. I can't find anything in Western Anatolia that would relate to this design, color, and or weave. And I find very little in Eastern Anatolia that would do that either. But saying that, I would think they would be more indicative because of the border of being more central Anatolia, I don't know, somewhere between Konya and Ladik maybe, but I really am not sure. The blue background one always appeared to me to be a little more Eastern Anatolia because of the symbolism, and but I'm really not sure. I'm looking for an answer.
Thank you. And a question about whether Yastiks, either the pile Yastiks you showed, or are they found in other areas besides Anatolia? Specifically, the audience member asks about the Ottoman-dominated Balkans.
You don't find pile Yastiks really used outside of Anatolia. In Iran, people tended to sit on the floor, and even though they had black tents, their internal environmental structure was a bit different. In the Balkans, you do find Yastiks of the non-pile variety that they actually placed on top of their, how how should I say, their cooking feature, which was a raised platform they had where they heated their food below it, and they actually slept above on top of it. And in the Balkans, I believe in Yugoslavia or Greece somewhere, they used flat woven yastiks on top to recline on or sleep with. Remember, yastiks are not pillows, they're cushions. And they're not bolsters either. They have their own unique purpose. You find among the Baluch, balishts and things like that that are small, but all these things are used even in among the Kyrgyz. There are small weavings like yastiks, and they're often used for storage bags, but they may have been used for similar features as well because it's the mother of invention.
And how about the Memling Gould design? Is that common, and is it an indication of an Eastern Anatolian origin?
No, not necessarily. What I found unique is that as I mentioned, I had never seen a narrow little Memling Gould rug from the 15th century. I wouldn't even have surmised they made this small little narrow runner. And it seemed, as I said, much like a yastik. You don't see them much later either in this Memling Gould format. And are they Eastern Anatolian? Not necessarily. You do see some of the Memling Goulds equated with some people who are interested in Turkoman weavings, because you will find in some Turkoman chuvals a repetition of the Memling Gould. Whether they were brought in with the Turkic people or not, I'm not sure. That's another contentious issue and an open question.
Thank you. So we're going to wrap up. I'm going to pose another couple of questions. Sure. The first one comes from a vastly greater scholar, and I can't do justice to it. And this person may need to email you personally afterwards, but let me try. Sure. I recall a stone carving from Göbekli Tepe. Okay, I can't pronounce it, but you recognize it.
Sure.
That is supposed to be a kind of seat cover with interwoven snakes. The heads of the snakes are very similar to lappets. Can we draw any parallel between these and the Anatolian Yastik lappets?
I know Göbekli Tepe. I know the architectural features that come from there. I have never seen that particular sculpture or carving that the person is referring to. And I think it would be a long shot to think that they had anything to do with lappets. I wouldn't see any connection. But to be fair, if someone would like to send me, or this person would like to send me an image of that, I'd be happy to look at it. I tend to know most of the structures at Göbekli Tepe, but I'd be happy to look at it, of course.
Another thoughtful question, the Ghirlandaio Yastik. Is it possible that the Ghirlandaio is in the corners while the central Gould is a reminder of one of the many versions of the Holbein medallion? The questioner recalls a carpet in the Zaleski collection with a similar cruciform medallion, and may perhaps wish to correspond with you about that.
Well, maybe they should do that. I'm not quite sure how to formulate the question into an answer. The Ghirlandaio pieces, which are known as tornali by the people who wove them in the Çanakkale area for hundreds of years, as Professor Glassy has pointed out, were known there. The point I was making is that the outer part of the medallion is repeated as corner brackets and are clearly defined as such, and that the residual effect of the cruciform in the center is used in the yastiks to form that medallion. But other than that, I'm not sure I get the full gist of the question. So if the person would like to send it to me, I'd be happy to respond.
Thank you. Last, very important question. What's your all-time favorite Yastik?
Let me frame it in this way. A dear friend and collector said to me after I published the book, "Why did you put the Yastik on the cover that you did rather than maybe something else?" And I said, because it's beautiful. The colors are beautiful, the wool's beautiful, and it's very reminiscent and indicative of what Yastiks are. So I would say I have two favorites. They're like children. I have many, many favorites, and if you cut and dice them up, they all have wonderful qualities of one another. There's one in Holly magazine that was featured when they did the article of I can tell you what it is. It's the one that I used at the beginning to show you what a Yastik was or is. And I showed you the Yastik, I showed you the back of the Yastik, and I showed you that it worked on the horizontal. It has almost a Memlik-like ghoul or medallion in the center. So I would say the cover piece and the piece that I showed you, which was the second slide, showing you the back of a Yastik and showing it on the vertical and horizontal. I think those are among my two favorites. I think there are 5 others that I put very close to that same category.
On that note, thank you so much, Brian. And you did put your email here on the last slide for anyone to note who has a more scholarly question or wishes to correspond with you. And also, I think you really are welcoming people to contact you about attending Rug Collectors Weekend.
Correct. And I hope they will. And I think it would be a very rewarding and fun experience for people who are just starting to collect, to learn more about rugs and actually feel and touch them. And for advanced collectors to see some pieces that you might not see otherwise. I can guarantee you there'll be pieces there you may have just maybe seen for the first time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. On behalf of the New England Rug Society, thank you, Brian, for a wonderful presentation. And thank you to everyone in our audience from all over the world. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye-bye.